Good evening. Welcome to the June 11th meeting of the Millis School Committee. I will start by announcing that this meeting is being recorded and can be viewed on Mondays at 7 o'clock on Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 37. And all meeting videos are posted on the Millis Public Schools website under School Committee. Take a roll call of attendance. To my left, Ms. Roach. Here. Ms. Briggs.
Here.
I'm here. Superintendent.
Here.
Assistant's here. Steve and Denise are both out. We have a student rep.
Here.
And no teacher reps. Jody, anybody signed in for open session?
There.
All right. Why don't we do student rep first so she can go study for her exams.
High schoolers are taking finals today until Friday following a V-Day schedule. There's a 12:15 bus for those who need it, and lunch is offered following the last exam of each day. School will end this Friday, June 14th, and there will be a Schools Out concert Friday evening for everyone at 6 o'clock at Tangerine East Farm. The public library is hosting study nights for high schoolers taking exams, and they're offering free pizza, and middle school graduation is Thursday night for the 8th graders at the school.
Excellent. Will you be doing a cameo at the concert on Friday night?
I will.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dory.
Good luck with your exams. Thanks, Dory.
And action items, we'll just take them a little bit out of order. Consideration to approve the May 7th and the May 21st school committee meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Roach.
I make a motion to approve the 5/7 school committee meeting minutes and the 5/21 school committee meeting minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. All right. Next is consideration to approve extended day rates. So, who would like to join? All right.
Do we have a paper for that?
In the
We have
in there, but I don't know that that's.
we have information on enrollment, but I didn't see
What the rates were?
the rate proposal. I know we've had it in other, if it's the same.
It's the same, I believe it's the same rate proposal
Okay.
of 5% each year for the next 3 years, just to remind the committee. What we did this time is we're not doing a formal proposal for you.
Okay.
We tried to answer some of your questions with some data, which I believe you have in your packet. So you
Yep.
have, I believe, I guess
There's-
really 5 separate items in a sense. You have a pro forma 3-year budget that I prepared for you that I believe the committee requested. You also have a projected revenue and fund balance as part of that. And then Jean prepared some statistics as far as, certainly as far as what we would need for staffing. And I'm going to yield to Jean to talk about actually the statistics that she pulled together, the information she pulled together.
Before we do that, I just want to make sure we have, what I have on the packet online is school attendance summary by grade.
Yep.
I've got a school staff ratio memo, staff-child ratios, which may or may not be related to this topic. I have fall 19-20 extended day enrollment as of June 5th. And that's all I have for extended day in what was shared in here. So I don't have a 3-year budget that I see.
No.
You have your packet. Do you have your packet?
Yeah.
Was that from the previous meeting, the 3-year budget?
No.
Did you email it to us instead? Was that
I
the
can
thing?
email it to you.
All right.
Okay.
We can load it into the folder right now
Can we?
because it was on the email.
It's on the share drive if you want to throw it in the folder for us.
So was it, if it was in other folders, if you go into, it's like, was it in the last meeting? So if you
No.
get-
No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't the last meeting.
Oh, okay.
it was the new one that Terry had done with, it had a cover memo. And then two.
I didn't receive that for the packet.
Okay. That's my, I apologize. I thought I'd sent it. Okay. Let me find it. Well, actually, take it back. I have it. I just need to close it.
Yeah, maybe you sent it to me and I thought it was CC'd to Jody.
Now, there's a lot of moving parts right now, so I'm sure I probably,
Right, no, I think, because
I may have sent it to Chris at the
I
building.
think you've sent it to me.
committee.
I
All right.
mean, I know you sent it to me, so
All
it
right.
could be my mistake in assuming it was sent to Jody as well.
All right. Bear with me here. Okay. So,
Do you want to talk about the enrollment while Terry's
Yes.
sending
why
that?
don't we
Yeah,
just
we can do that.
while I do this.
And then Jody can load it and move it
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, if we want to talk, yeah, the school attendance and,
Yep, the school
Yeah.
attendance summary.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you had inquired about the last time we met was what the extended day enrollments look like as compared to the district as a whole. So we were able to go back and by grade from the 12-13 school year to the 18-19 school year, I was able to compile all the actual enrollments in the school for those years. And you can see by the total line, it's dropping just a little bit each year. And I did a line below that showing the percent change from the prior year. Then below that, what I did was I took the extended day enrollments, starting with 14-15, which was the last one that I could pull up, and then through 18-19. And I did a ratio of total enrollment to school enrollment. And I was actually really pleased to see that it was fairly consistent throughout those 5 years that we had there. And then one of the other things that I think, Mr. Conroy, you asked me last time was, so based on the number of enrollment of children, how many staff do we have? So I was trying to figure out how do I do that exactly, because we have so many different pieces. So what I did was I went back to the May 1st payroll for all of these years, and I pulled the number of staff who got a check for that payroll. Because, of course, we've got vacation, summer,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. But I thought for comparison's sake, that would be a good thing to pull. And then I did the ratio of that total number of staff to the number of extended day children. And again, that came out pretty consistent. You may recall when we last spoke, and I was talking about the ratios, I said I always start with a 10-to-1 ratio as a guideline. And as you can see, these came out between 5.5 and 6. What it doesn't account for is, number one, administration is in this ratio, so I counted all of us, including myself. Number two, and something that has been gradually changing, I think, over the years, is we've had more and more children who have more social and emotional needs, which means when you have that, you need a lower ratio to be able to meet the needs of all of the kids in our program. So you'll see that bring that number down a little bit as well. What I thought was significant about it, however, is that it's pretty steady across the number of years. So I thought those were interesting bits of info that might help inform your decision, or at least know a little bit more about us.
How many admin staff are there that are counted in this?
There's me, and Judy Riley is our lovely program assistant who does a lot of administrative work for us. And then Rachel Grinchgod is sort of a jack of all trades. She coordinates a lot of the fun labs. She's been helping us with a lot of the special programs and special days, like the early release days, the no school days, the vacations. And she's also in the process of putting together a program that we've been working on to help with our, it's not necessarily a CIT training program but to combine our middle school with our younger children and hopefully train some of those middle school age children to be ready to work in extended day once they reach the age of 16, and they will have seen a lot of it already. So we're trying to put together some kind of comprehensive counselor and training program.
Okay.
And they're both part-time, correct?
Correct.
Rachel and Judy, are
Correct.
they 20 to 30 hours a week?
Yep, and actually, Judy has been doing part-time direct care with the kids in the afternoon and part-time administrative. And Rachel has been doing the same. The other beauty of having those folks and be so flexible and help with so many different things is when we do need subs, they're always stepping up to the plate and helping us out with that, because we want to maintain those ratios and have to maintain them. So it's nice to have those folks on board for that as well.
It's in the
So-
folder.
Thank
yeah,
you.
and- yeah, and the, so with those, the head count basically of 3, what that does to the ratio is changes the numbers by about 0.7. So
Okay.
the ratio goes up. So for, in 18-19, it goes from 5.33 to 6. In 16-17, it goes from 6.08 to 6.8, if you back out the admin.
If you back out the
Yeah.
admins.
I see what you're saying.
Columns need to be bigger.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
they can, with the
Just from the
columns,
budget,
we can't see all the information.
For
all
what?
the columns.
It needs to be a little bit wider. You can figure out what's in there though, right?
In what? No, part of what the school attendance one, it is showing that, you know, our ratio of staff the staff has actually declined over the last few years, going back. If you go back to 14, 15, 15, 16, we had 30 and 32, and we're down to 27, which corresponds with the, you know, 35 kids that have gone, that have, enrollment's declined in the last 3 years too. Which, so our staffing ratio has stayed consistent through those years, so.
Right.
All right, so that's that, and then, so I don't know if we want to touch on the staff-child ratio. Does that tie into?
Yeah, excuse me, that was some of what I was already explaining as to why we may start out in our minds with a 10-to-1, but what
Okay.
are some of the things that can affect that and why a straight 10-to-1 doesn't necessarily work. So I just explained a
Okay.
little bit more about that it has a lot to do with the needs of the children, with exactly what we're offering, how many spaces we're in, what kinds of activities we're trying to do. You know, are we going on field trips? Is it a field trip that's sedentary, or are we in a big crowd? You always want lower ratios when that happens. We need to think about logistics of drop-off and pickup, because with one of the things that I'm really pleased about since I've come on board is we've got that locked building in the afternoon now. But that logistically, there's got to be somebody there to open those doors, and so all those things affect what those ratios are.
So Terry, have you been able to send or share that budget file?
It's up
in
there.
the folder.
It's in the
Oh, it is?
folder.
It's in the
I
folder.
updated it. It's called, it's at the bottom.
Oh, there it is.
It's
Got
called
it.
Extended Day
It
Budget
was down
FY
at the bottom.
2022.
All right, got it.
And
Okay.
I opened up the column, so you should be able to.
Yep,
see
it's
it.
good.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, excellent. So Terry, you want to walk us through that then?
Well, the first worksheet is the budget, and again, it's a pro forma budget. And I should explain, let me start, the object codes are just the general object codes that we use in the DESI account chart, and that was just a way for me to organize. And then you'll see the descriptions, and you'll see I've broken out the labor by.
So hold on, I don't think we're
Hold on.
looking at the same thing.
Hang on a
No.
minute, there was two things. I didn't see that there were two workbooks, I'm doing the second one right now.
Okay, so you sent the revenue to them, right?
I sent the first one.
It looks like-
The one we're
Projected
looking at
fund
is
balance, projected
projected.
Oh, you
expenditures.
said yeah, it'd be better if you looked at the budget first,
Okay.
because then the projected fund balance will make more sense.
Got it.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Wait a
Thank you.
minute, no. It already, do you already placed it? Okay, so how do you name it a second? I'm not good with how to say.
Just add a 1 to it.
Yeah, but I gotta be able to edit it. New folder, maybe?
Well, what,
Is there like a save as?
I tried to say that.
like me to send it to you
You have
again?
it- If you have it open,
Well,
you
so I
could just
have
share
it
it
as,
with us.
Should share.
I have it as a PDF, as an Excel. There's two workbooks.
Right.
I saved the first workbook. I tried to use the same name.
Let me try doing something.
Send it to her again with a different name.
Yeah, that's why I'm gonna.
Also, I'm going to.
Team effort. Good thing Steve's not here to be
I
like,
know.
I've got it on paper.
We wouldn't have had it. We wouldn't have had
It's a
it.
good day for him not to be here.
I know.
Is it in his packet? Grab it.
Mm-mm.
Right, he doesn't even
I
have it.
think we
No.
did- we missed it.
So he wouldn't even have paper.
Yeah, he's in the dark.
What just came through? Something just came, okay. Hang on.
So I just shared
What do you want?
mine.
So
That comes through.
Yeah.
Did you, the one you came through as a header, came through as extended day budget?
But you
Yep.
put it in the folder, Nikki?
Extended.
No,
data.
she
Email?
I just
she
shared
emailed.
it.
She shared it,
Okay.
so it's in our email.
So it's in shared with me.
She
Yeah.
just emailed it to us.
So you shared the Excel file, right?
Mhm.
Is it all the way down the bottom?
Yep,
Yeah, okay.
It's in your email.
which has both tabs.
Right,
Yep.
okay. So, all right, let's go to the first tab.
Okay.
All right, so now, this will make more sense when I start talking to you again.
Okay.
Okay, the object codes are again, DESI codes, just a way to sort of logically organize a budget. The descriptions are, again, tie into those object codes, with the exception that normally we might group the labor under descriptions, and what I've done is, to give you a little bit more detail here, I've given you the actual descriptions of the type of classifications that Jean has for her staffing. So she has a director, a site coordinator, group leaders 1 and 2, leaders in training, behaviorist, administrative assistant. Those are the main classifications. Now, as we go down, there's a couple of things, or at least one thing that you don't normally see in your budget, and that's retirement. Okay? And the town does charge retirement to this budget. And in fact, there's a question, shall we say, about how much they're charging for retirement against this fund that I'm going to need to bring up with them, because I believe they're overcharging the revolving fund for retirement. And Jean and I have talked about it, and I'm gonna have to meet with Carol and talk through that with her. And then you'll see things like custodial services, contracted services, cell phones, instructional supplies, general supplies, books and periodicals, utilities, PD, PD travel, rental, and field trips. These are all kind of based on some history and some numbers that we have based on past, looking at the accounts and looking, and it's somewhat arbitrary, but not totally. There's a little bit of science here. So, and certainly in the first year that Jean and I would be working with the budget, would there be some movement back and forth, and would you see some transfers? Yeah, probably. But again, I think we'd refine it over time. So, the next column where it says number, that 32 is the number of bodies, not in other words, we're really running about, I think, what'd you say, 27 is our current staffing? That's accurate. But in the sense of you have some turnover, when I was calculating the base hours, okay, there were some people that were with us part of the year, and then they left and some other people came and took their place. So when I was trying to calculate the base budget to use for calculating and moving forward, there might have been a couple of bodies that filled that one position, so that's why you're seeing 32 there.
Where do you see
Where are we looking
32?
at? What, on the
I don't
If you
second?
look at the number column,
And scroll down to the bottom.
you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see 32.
Oh, okay,
I just don't want to mislead you and think that I'm showing 32 employees and she's working with 27. In the sense of overall, at any given time, there's 27 people, okay? But over the course of the year, we had 32 that were involved in the program, okay? And then basically using a base number and using the salary schedule that we had put forward to you, we calculated out proposed wages, okay, for the salary grid. And then, again, obviously proposed expenses, and that's where you see our 3-year proposed budgets of $571,222 in FY20, $611,281 for FY21, and $632,180 for FY22. So that's how we get our budgetary figures.
Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
can you just give us a little bit of what is in the 10,000 contracted services and what makes up the $80,000 in supplies?
In the contracted services, and again, what I did is I took the overall amount that they, because right now they have one line.
What's a contract, what
No, but what I'm
is a
saying is they have
contracted
one
service?
line from the town's, see, because we don't control this right now.
Yeah,
So the town has this all in one line of $132,000.
okay,
So what we tried to do is make it more nuanced in this budget. So the $10,000 in contracted services would be a couple of things. One would be if you bring somebody in to do professional development in-house, that would be a contracted service.
okay,
The other would be if you, instead of having a field trip, you were to bring what I generally call in general terms an artist in residence. Okay? That would be a contracted service. In
Okay.
other words, it's not an employee, but it's somebody that you're paying through a contract to provide, some
like a
kind of
music
educational
day or
service.
something.
Yeah, or
Exactly.
an art.
Art,
Got it.
storyteller, music sometimes, all of those things. That would be contracted services. Instructional supplies is pretty straightforward. I mean, anything, well, no, it's not straightforward. I'm going to take that back.
It's not, because,
It's not.
I'm asking the
Particularly in this
question.
group, because instructional supplies, we would think of it as books and workbooks and things for this kind of school, okay? But in an extended day program, there may be games, there may be, for example, sports equipment. We talked about a program for the middle school potentially that would involve sewing. So sewing machines might be instructional supplies.
Okay.
And related to that, obviously, things like thread, things like, material.
sure,
So those would be considered instructional supplies,
okay,
okay? General supplies is going to be more like copy paper, office supplies. And again, that separation of that $80,000, I will tell you is a little arbitrary right now, okay? Again, I had a figure of 132,000 as a base number to work with for everything that is here, because the town only records it under one account.
Oh, so we don't have a previous year breakdown like this?
We don't, no, because you see, this is one of the problems with not having this recorded in our accounting, is that municipal account structure and the DESI account structure is very different. The town only needs to record it in one account, so they do, and I don't blame them, that's how they're organized. For us, we would have it much more broken down. When we have the final conversion for Munis, it will be broken down like this, but at the moment, we're trying to create a budget really for the first time, in many respects. And so that's why, we try to make some judgment calls, based on experience and kind of how these things usually work.
But the bottom number
Yeah.
is in line with what you spent,
With-
what the
it's
budget
in
was
line with the
last year?
total- Yes, it's in line with the, in other words, the supply, if you will, the non-salary lines
Yep.
are in line with what has been spent in the past. The
You're
total.
just trying to figure out how they
I'm
each
just trying to
bucket.
give you, trying to give a more detailed breakdown and align it a little bit better. The retirement is based on the salaries,
Got it.
based on what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, right now, HR, I have plugged in what it should be, and I believe that that is an argument we could win, okay? Because, you know, it is what it is. I mean, it's, we can go to Norfolk and we can see the rate, and that's the rate they should be charging us. And then the salaries, as I say, are the changing variable. Right now, we have based it on the proposed wage schedule that we submitted to you, I think, 2 meetings ago, if I remember correctly, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. So, all right, so that's how we get to our budget numbers, and the big jump from 20 to 21 is related to LIT, which is related to the minimum wage.
Yes. And again, as you remember, the minimum wage is kind of what drove our initial creation of this. And what we were trying to do is say, oh, how could we create something where, quite frankly, we didn't have to keep looking at this every year, okay? And so what we did is in year one, for the LITs, which are the folks that typically start at minimum wage, is we started them at the minimum wage that will actually go into effect in 21, not 20. So they're a year ahead. And then they keep, that schedule keeps moving, so it's a year ahead, and then the idea is that by the end of year 3, and I'm not quite sure where it's moving, after 20 would be 22, so I'm not quite sure where it moves to in 23, but my hope is at that point you'd be able to reevaluate it, and now you no longer have to jump it based on minimum wage, but now you can look at it more like you would look at every other contract, and you would be able to adjust it on some sort of percentage and move it forward in a more normal fashion. But we had to kind of get it to a point of where it was moving, particularly that column, was moving ahead of minimum wage, because that was the problem. And I would say that because we were making that big jump, we didn't jump, so if we have a leader in training who was at step 1 this year, okay, because they would be getting a big jump, they're gonna still be at step 1 next year, because they will be getting a big jump in pay, even at step 1. We did not give them an experiential movement in that schedule.
Our leaders in training are the students, right?
Yes.
Like
Those are high
CITs?
school students, minimum age of 16.
Yep. And minimum wage is going up to 15?
It's going up.
Gradually.
It's going up to $12.75 next year, $13.50 the year after, and then $14.25 in 22.
So we're jumping them up to what,
We're
1425?
jumping them up. The first year is $13.50.
Which is one step higher than what
One
minimum
step,
wage?
1 year, yeah, basically 1 year ahead.
So why don't we just do minimum wage and increase with minimum wage?
Because what happens is I tried to work out different iterations of the schedule.
Uh-huh.
Then I had to do some kind of arbitrary manufactured jump in year 3. I couldn't keep ahead of minimum wage by doing it on a percentage basis. The schedule broke down. And that's the problem when you try to establish a schedule. You try to establish a schedule so it doesn't break, okay? And the
But-
schedule basically broke in year 3.
But you're trying to establish a schedule based on percentage. Why not establish the schedule based on actual amount?
Well, it is a schedule based, the schedule is keyed off of that first step,
Okay.
okay?
So the first step goes to 1275, right?
But then what I'm saying is that.
Sorry.
No,
Just wanna
no, it's a good
understand it.
question. It's a good question, and it's hard to, it's hard to explain. I've constructed a lot of schedules in my life. So what happens is if you do the 1275 and then you do the 1350,
Yep.
okay, What happens is to jump it to the 14, whatever, what did I say, it was 1425?
1425.
Okay,
1425.
1425,
January
Yeah.
2022.
is that in doing that kind of jump, okay, and just matching minimum wage, is that if they do something that happens mid-year that year,
Yep.
then the schedule breaks. And see, if they do something mid-year in '22 and you're ahead of it, then the schedule doesn't break, you're all set. Because you're ahead of the next jump.
You
So-
Mm-hmm.
mean if they further increase the minimum wage in the
Correct.
third year?
Right now, I believe it's going to go up to 15, but you're going to be ahead of the next jump, okay?
That's
the
the
way
problem
the
we ran
schedule
into
will
in,
work.
with the secretaries in the Unit B.
Because you will be able to adjust the schedule on a percentage basis and bring it over the next jump on minimum wage.
But are we jumping them too much now? So we're jumping.
I will tell you this, I will tell you that in Milford, in fact, I think I have the picture on my phone, you can go to Dunkin' Donuts and you can apply for a job.
Yeah,
at
but we're
$15 an hour.
talking about 16-year-old kids,
And-
16
no,
and
but-
17-year-old kids.
And I'm talking about a Dunkin' Donut who's taking applications for
Yep.
anybody, starting at $13 an hour.
Okay.
I mean, it's not Millis, I agree. It's two communities over, it's certainly different, but,
Right.
I mean, that's, we're not that far off.
Understood.
So as it relates, what is, I don't know if you know this or have it, part of what I understood a piece is, what is that jump, what would that jump result in as a percent? So if we just matched the increases each year, what kind of a jump would we have each year in expenses? Like, so under the current proposal, we're looking at a 29% jump in expense from FY20 to FY21, and then it goes down to less than 1%. If we just look at that line, we go from 57,347 in 20 up to 74,180 to 74,622.
I'm doing the math for you, that's why I'm.
So,
Is there a way to sort of even it out a little?
well, and that's what I was trying, so that's what I was wondering is, in order to even out the proposed tuition increases, does that, you have to increase it more up front so that you can
Cover it.
absorb the higher increase in expense, staying stable in
Yeah.
the revenue increases, is one way to kind of, like, just based on the FY20 expenses, for example, to stay positive in 20, we could do 3% in FY20. Well, that kind of breaks it even, but it's really like you could do 3.5.
And then there's not so much of a jump in FY21?
Well, what ends up happening is if you only meet the revenue in the first, so just to meet the projected expenditures in FY20, we'd need a 3.5% increase in revenue. But then, because there's no compounding effect,
Yep.
you would need, I'm just doing it here, I'm at 6 already, you'd need a 7% in year 2,
Okay.
where Terry's model has it as 555. And then,
Okay.
so it's just kind of, but then in year 3, you could get away with, you'd be back down to 3.5%.
So it's either 555 or do 3.5, 7, 3.5.
Right.
I'm not necessarily sure about that.
Based on the projected revenue, leaving your expenses on the
Yeah.
proposed revenue, if I change the revenue formula in the projected to 1 times 3.5 in FY20,
Yeah.
it gives me a projected surplus deficit of negative 4041. And then in FY21, I make it multiply FY20 by 7%. That gives me a surplus of 975 for that year. And then I do 3.5 in the out year, and it gives me a surplus of 2,000 in FY22.
So what does
Oh, I
that
see what
gain
you're
you?
doing. I'm looking at the fund balance.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
I'm trying to manage the fund balance. And if I'm looking at it from managing the fund balance, I look at it and say, okay, in 19, in this year, I'm gonna end at $91,000, so I'm projecting. All right, so if I went at 3%, all right, across the board, okay, I'm gonna go up in 20 to a fund balance of 104.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm gonna start dropping down to 94.6. And then I'm gonna drop down again in the third year of 82, a little lower than I started, but that's also the year that we're gonna have to do a reevaluation anyways, as to where we sit.
Well, and that also goes to the first question of what is the fund balance that we need to have?
Right.
Because the other piece of the equation in this, which we've seen, we're trending down, and I don't know if that's going to continue to be the trend, but in any one of these years, if we get another 10 kids, we've just generated a significant surplus, which is why personally I'd rather look at the fee adjustment every year with an understanding of enrollment than adopt a proposal that commits to a 3-year plan that
And I don't
doesn't
think we have
get.
a problem with that. We were sort of laying out sort of a long-term plan for
Yep.
you. Well, I don't think we were necessarily saying adopt tonight a 555. Well, maybe I did, and if I did, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's
But
no, that's just the proposal.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the plan. I would look to,
yeah, you really should look at it annually.
because that's, we've seen it in preschool, we've seen it in other things. You get 15 kids coming in, and all of a sudden
Yeah, you may find that
you got a surplus and you don't need to do the
brother
bump.
and sister want to keep their kids to extend the day because they're in a new building, in
Right.
which case you're right, the revenues all of a sudden have
Right.
elevated dramatically. I would say the budget, I think, is reasonably sound, which is, I think, something that helps us have a better handle on what we're gonna spend. And I think that's also a help. So I think that, maybe, and again, I've had a tremendous respect, and I just love working with Jean. She's great to work with. So,
Thanks.
no, she is, she's wonderful. And I just think we've got some really good, I think we've got solid management of the program. I think we've got really a pretty good handle on both, not only in labor, but in expenses and how that money is going to be used. And so, I would feel comfortable if we went forward with with the proposed wage schedule. And I understand your concern, but if we went forward with a proposed wage schedule and a 3% increase, I think it still can be managed.
I would look, I think the big jump is in 21. I think for next year, a 5% generates a surplus of $8,000. A 3% increase, generates a yearly deficit of 2,800. And if we did, 4, which is basically what we look for the budget to go up, 4% would be a surplus of $2,800.
And I'll be honest with you, in a year, that budget that we put forward as a pro forma budget, we may be able to find that money in budget.
So,
Now that you're tracking it to
Right,
different
now that we're
buckets.
looking
Right.
at it, now that we're thinking this way, we may be able to, that's just not a lot of money to find in sort of saying, hey, now we're kind of looking at how we're spending the money in a more detailed fashion. You know what, we really don't need, $20,000 in office supplies, we need, 17.5 there. We need, something different here, whatever. So, I mean, I think there's a way to manage that, you know.
Down to 3%?
Well, I think so. I mean, I just don't think that's a lot of money to manage away.
$2,800.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No. And I guess I think also, and we, not in formal policy, but in all of our reserves, we kind of have this number that we like to manage this balance to, that we just keep.
Right.
I don't remember what we had for extended day, and part of it was, I think it was kind of sad in this other world, but 90,000 seems high if we don't know what we're doing with it or what it would relate to.
But, Mr. Chair, if I may, I think you have to keep some in reserve because of the salaries that you are obligated to pay.
3 months of operating.
Yeah,
costs
that's
is
generally
the
what-
general
That's
rule.
I was just gonna say, that's generally what they say is 3 months, and,
Which would
I
be,
don't know, I'm pulling out my phone to do this, but, I mean,
So that'd be close to 100, it'd be over 100.
yeah, it'd be over 100, but I mean, you know, if you're in that ballpark, I think you're okay. I mean, in an ideal world, in a perfect world, you'd probably have somewhere around 150. But I also think that's probably high for this type of program.
It's very
I think-
conservative.
Yeah,
I think.
because we don't have 3 months reserve
Right,
anywhere else in the $15 million school budget. We don't have 3-month
Yeah.
reserve of salaries.
no.
I mean, we have,
I think to be
we've-
perfectly honest, you have other programs that would be more concerning to me than having 3 months reserve than this one. Okay.
so,
I would take the opportunity to say that one of the policies that we should discuss this next year when we're discussing policies is a reserve policy for funds, for all funds.
so what if we do a 3% increase which would potentially leave a $2,800 shortfall. And if that's not found, it would take our balance down to just under $89,000 at the end of next year. And then we just need to, the second year is the,
Well, we can revisit, I mean, again, I think we're talking about doing this on an annual basis.
no, I know, but I'm trying not to put us in a position where
You have to make a big
you
jump.
have to do this gigantic
Yeah.
one,
I,
which I'm,
if you do 4 next year instead of 3, does it bring it down to a 5.5, 6% increase the following year?
it would take it to probably, yeah, it'd still be 6. But,
But we may have a better we will have a better understanding of what the true budget is, so it may not be 6.
Right.
And we'll have, better understanding of what the new minimum wage laws will be.
Yep.
So there is a risk there is a risk there that, it turns out that we do have to do a 6 or
Yep.
7, but it may not too.
Right. so, all right, so what do people think?
4 might be the
4?
4.
that
Okay.
certainly gives us a little breathing room in this first year as we move forward with a little different management style. And then, again, we may be able to come back to you and say, you know what, I mean, I think ideally we'd say, you know what, we put this all in place, we managed it real well, and you know what, we can go with 3.5 next year or
Right.
Uh,
whatever.
You might have,
Yeah.
the fund balance might be a little bit larger,
Right.
and you've managed
We
it
can-
well.
We can
and
manage it based on where our fund balance is. You feel it?
Yeah, my other thought about going 4% this year is that the preschool enrollments
Yeah.
went out quite a while ago, they're done. I don't think we would increase the preschool this year. Everything else went out with a statement that the rates were subject to change.
Right.
So I wouldn't increase the preschool this year because they really weren't forewarned that it could could change, so that won't be
It'd
included.
just be the rest of your,
It would be everything else.
it'd be everything else. So we do
That
the,
makes
we do
sense.
the 4% for everybody in the extended
None
day
of
except the
preschool.
preschool.
Yeah.
That actually
Preschool would be the
makes, that actually makes a
subsequent
lot of
year.
sense.
Jean, what percent is generated by
I knew you were
preschool
gonna
versus,
ask
I
me that,
know,
and I'm
just a
sorry, I
real
don't know off the top of my
rough,
head.
is
but-
it like 20% of your program?
How many
Quarter?
kids? Do you know how many kids?
The schedule
Um,
says 26.
Yeah.
26 out of
26,
149.
But they come all different hours of the
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
and have different rates for the
Sure.
different hours. So
Right.
I don't,
That's another reason maybe
Okay.
to
I'm
go
not
to
sure the
4
exact
instead
amount of
of 3.5.
Yeah,
I can find that though. I can.
Yeah.
If we do 4, our budget went up 4%, basically, so.
Yeah.
It gives
Alright.
you a
I'm comfortable
little
with
wiggle
4.
room to absorb the
I
fact that
think we're
preschool
comfortable with it.
is not
and-
That's good
going
with
and
four?
I think that would also help us do exactly what Jean's suggesting, which I think is a good idea.
Okay.
And I would entertain a motion for the FY20 preschool rate. Or, sorry, the FY20 extended day increase.
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Roach.
I make a motion that we increase the FY20 extended day rate,
Tuition rate.
tuition rate by 4%.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you guys very much
Thank
for
you.
Thank you.
all of the work on this. It's been very helpful. And
Well, again, Jean's done,
Appreciate it.
Jean's done a tremendous amount of work, and it's been a pleasure to work with her.
It's a team. It's a team. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Great.
All right.
Am I leaving or coming back, or what am I doing?
You can stay there.
Yeah, you can say leave.
All right.
You are not
I
dismissed.
will leave
I am
you.
not dismissed.
We
Thank
can
you all.
do,
Thank you.
thanks,
Thank you.
Jean.
Athletics.
End we do end of year transfers, because just
Oh,
'cause
we
that's
do
an
end of year
action item,
Yes,
so we
that's
can
an
do that.
action item, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see here. I think you have them in your packet, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and on your, okay. There we go, okay. So again, these transfers are based on the financial report you received, and I would just make a couple of notes. Up at the top, you have 3 lines, which are the interfund transfers, if you will. And the reason that sort of has to happen first is because that then impacts the amount of money that I have to make an intra-fund transfer in Fund 10. And then from there, it's just, you can literally see the lines that I am taking money from in the first section, and the sources of funds, the lines that I am moving section or money to in the uses of funds. I would say, again, this is preliminary. There will no doubt be one more set of transfers once we have final figures. It'll either be at the very end of June or at your July meeting that we'll do the final, probably the July meeting.
Okay.
That we'll do the final transfers, because then we'll have closed the books and we'll know what we have. But this should be the lion's share of it.
So just to clarify, in the yellow, Fund 70 is school choice, Fund 34 is transportation revolving,
Yes,
and Fund 10 is our operating budget. So that's what we had approved last meeting of transferring expenses out of choice and out of transportation revolving back into Fund 10, our operating budget.
So just, I'm gonna walk through just so I know I'm explaining it correctly. So if I look at, I'm gonna go through the third one in yellow and then the first one in white.
Yep.
So we transferred $40,000 of driver salaries that we originally expended out of the revolving fund, and we moved those expenses into the operating budget because we had surplus in the operating budget.
That's correct.
And then in the first line after that, now this is all within, this is just moving things within the operating budget to different lines. So we moved $2,000 of expense that we originally had coded to school committee secretary and moved it to legal services?
No,
Okay.
not precisely. So the actual uses of funds happens first,
Okay.
okay? So what happens is I say, all right, this is how much money I need to have,
Mm-hmm.
all right? And so I start with the uses section first, and that's why I say I have to take that money that I need to bring out of revolving into Fund 10 first. So I know the total that I need. And so those are, there's not a line-to-line match,
Okay.
okay? This is basically a total of, if you go on that right-hand side, that's a total of all of the funds that are in deficit, with the exception of, quite frankly, for the purposes of time, if it was 4 cents in deficit, I didn't bother with it at this point in time. You know, if it was a penny, something like that. But anything that had dollars involved, basically, that was in deficit, that's money that we're moving dollars to.
For example, that first one, legal services, because of all the contract negotiations we had this
Exactly.
year, we overexpended by 18,000.
Gotcha.
Thus, on the left-hand side, it's kind of opposite because we're used to seeing deficits in red. But on the left-hand side, we're using several of
Right.
those lines that add up to 18,000 to cover the deficit in legal services.
And to use that first line as an example. So for example, why are we taking money out of the school secretary line, school committee secretary line? Well, as it so happens, we've been paying Jody, appropriately so, her school committee secretary salary bill as part of the regular salary line. So I know that money's not going to be spent. It's not, Jody's not going to get paid for being here. She is. Okay? But we're paying it out of a different line. So I know that money's not going to be spent, so I know it's free for me to take. Okay?
So you went down and figured out you had 1,299,
Yeah.
and then you went back to everything that had positive,
Right.
had a surplus, and said, how much can I take out of
How much
it?
can I take?
And then the bottom line
Yeah.
equals out.
And when you do them, and again, my goal this year, and this little thing next door kind of defeated me a little bit, as well as being sort of my first year here, I guess, probably in part too, but the goal sometimes is to try and do some of this during the year so that you can do a little bit more matching. But in truth, it's very hard to match transfers. Because typically speaking, you know, if you're doing it right, if you find that you have a problem, it's hopefully an emergency problem, which means that where you're going to need the money is going to have to come from some place that you've decided you don't need the money and they don't match. So it's rare that you can kind of match a transfer, you know, sort of line to line. But yes, that's basically, it's a bottom line to bottom line type of solution.
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Winch?
can I ask a silly question maybe?
No silly questions.
With some of these lines that we were really far off, do we reforecast the budget so it's better reflects what we spend?
During the year?
Well, I don't know, just at the beginning, so there's one that's, the very last one, it was 174,000 off.
Which was the tuition line, I believe.
Okay. Or even some that are like, I don't know, 13,000 off, or
Yeah.
even 5,000 off. Is that normally are we normally that amount off every year? And do we need to, I guess what I'm asking is it normal to have this many transfers? Or is there something we can do to put the money in the
I'm certainly
buckets?
hoping there's a lot less next year.
Yeah.
I would say it's normal to have some transfers. I don't think you can go through a year without transfers.
Yep.
But to answer your question directly, so for example, and the last lines are actually good examples. Tuitions, what tends to happen is you do your very best to budget your out-of-district tuitions, and for that matter, things like Norfolk Aggie and Keefe and those types of schools, as accurately as you can. But then what will happen invariably is that if you budget money in, let's say, private school tuitions, you may have, and you want this actually, you may find that you don't have kids attend private school. That's a good thing, because they usually cost you more money. But all of a sudden, they're all going to collaboratives, and you didn't put enough money for collaboratives. So, again, that's one of the places sometimes you can do
It's
some
tough.
matching.
Yep.
But that's why you will see the big numbers, because those are big numbers there. Tuitions typically are big numbers. Sometimes in the utility area, you will find that depending on the season, the type of winter you have, you may find that you did your best to budget for snow, we've all been there, and not snow, New Hampshire has to do that.
Heating
for
cost,
oil
or,
and
yeah.
oil
yeah.
and electricity, and you have over budgeted for the electricity, but you've under budgeted for the oil. Those types of things do happen. Again, hopefully it doesn't become a big thing. I think the big concerning thing this year was that we just didn't have staffing in the right places. And Nancy's seen the sheets that I've created, and we're going to be going through them again. And then once we're all happy with them, meaning the administrative team, then before Kathy sets up her payroll this year, she and I will literally go through every single employee to make sure they're in the right budget code, that they're allocated the right way. Whether, because again, they conceivably could have an allocation between Fund 10, the operating fund, but maybe some of them, part of them is in choice, maybe part of them is in a grant. If they're in a grant, what grant? So we're spending a lot of time this year trying and correct those things. Will we nail it 100%? I'm sure there's going to be something that we'll pick up, and I'm waiting for, the fact to be said, and it's true. It will be my fault if I miss it, so I am waiting, and it will be my fault if I miss it.
Thank you.
One other thing that we've done, that we've chosen not to do this year just because we were trying to match all the pieces, but we can do transfers whenever we want. And we've done them on a quarterly basis before, so we get through the winter and we find, whether it's gas, oil, we just have heat savings, and we just say, okay, we're gonna use this funding to pay for something new, or we're going to move salaries out of choice and free up choice. So we can do them whenever we want. We just haven't done them this year. So,
Okay.
all right. So I would entertain a motion to approve the transfers as presented.
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Briggs,
I move that we approve the transfer of funds as presented
Second.
tonight.
been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, Terry.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
so then we don't, you're thinking we won't need to do, we can do the next ones if we met in July.
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
and that would be probably the appropriate time, because what we want to do is the final transfers we do, we want to do them when they're, the absolute, we know what the numbers are.
Okay.
Because we'll have closed encumbrances, we'll have done all of our end-of-year stuff. I mean, we'll have final numbers, so I think that's appropriate. I think that's basically what we tried to do last year.
Great. Thank you. All right, so why don't we do athletics?
We do athletics. Was there an athletic sheet in the, all
Yeah.
right, because that'll save
The-
us some
And
time.
there's a memo
There's
too.
a nice big format one.
Yeah, I
Oh.
think you should have
Oh, perfect. Is that what you
Jody printed
printed?
out for you.
Thank you, Julie.
So, one of the challenges was obviously to present the information to you in a different format than we did in the fall. which we've done. And the numbers are correct, 15 through 19. However, in getting what I call it gifts and boosters, but it includes any team fundraising as well, and likewise any expenses in that regard. We really could only glean numbers from 17, 18, and 19.
That's fine.
And I have to say it was an educational experience. And as you know, I have to commend the coaches and the Mohawk Club, or Mohawk Boosters, and really all of those folks involved with our athletic teams. Because again, they are private organizations, they do not have to give me this information. But they were very willing to do that, and they were very helpful to do it. And so what you have up at the top, and you see the distinction of that particular information in blue, is in the revenue column, is you'll see that there's a little bit of fluctuation there. Now I will tell you a couple of things that as we move forward and try to track this information that aren't necessarily covered here, okay? So number one, I got an email from one of the coaches who said we do no fundraising. And then she proceeded to tell me of all the stuff that the kids bought for themselves. So I didn't have any numbers, I couldn't really record it, but I'm thinking if all of the kids on that team bought themselves team jackets, and a team jacket is between $70 and $90 a head, that's a pretty significant expense that was basically paid for probably by either some parents or some kids who earn money.
Parents.
You know,
Right.
probably parents. But that's not covered here. So there's yet another aspect of athletic expenses that I'm not quite sure how to gather, okay? I mean, we can do it subjectively, but I don't know that we can do it objectively. It just happened, we had a great day for it. The Family Fun
Fest.
Family
Yep.
Fun Fest. Okay, great event. This year's event is going to be split between all the different athletic teams. I've talked to Brian. He's going to, track it for me, so he'll be able to provide me that information. But that's kind of a different animal because it's not the Boosters Club, it's not any particular team, and that is a group that's now actually incorporated. So again, it's a private group. They don't have to give me the information. Brian, of course, is very cooperative. He's very easy to work with. He has no problem doing that. So again, next year as we update this information, I have no doubt that I will be able to glean that information. And so that is something that is not included here as well. And I did not have last year's numbers either. So those are not included. So when we update it for this year, we may get some numbers for last year as well. So those are things on the revenue side. Are there questions? The other thing I would just have to say again on the revenue, I never consider operating budget revenue, but okay, I said that, I'm done. So is there things on revenue we want to talk about before we get into the expenses? Hearing none?
What is gut camp?
6:30 to 7:30, 4 days a week
In the
for like
summer.
6 weeks in the summer. Olivia Zatoli does basically a boot camp.
Like a strength and conditioning.
Strength and
For anybody?
conditioning.
For the kids?
Yeah.
For the kids?
Is it the nationally affiliated?
No, it's anybody 7th grade, going into 7th grade and up.
Is it the nationally affiliated gut camp, or is it just one we've done here?
I
I think
There
think
is
it's
a-
just that.
it's just ours.
It's just
what
ours,
they- yeah.
because there is a nationally affiliated.
She's
gut
tough though. She gets them
Yeah,
going.
she's-
camp. So I'm sure- yeah. There is a nationally affiliated gut camp, and yeah, so it's not an easy, gut camps are not easy. So, and they're usually pretty popular.
For the first week, there's a lot of kids, and then
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
there's not so many.
Until they realize it's early and it's hard.
Yeah,
And it's summer.
right.
And it's 6 in the morning in the summer.
So then when we get into the revenue, again, it's broken down with a little bit more detail between both the type of expense and where the expense is coming from. And you'll see again a blue line where you have the expenses coming from gifts, excuse me. And I generally classify it as equipment. I would say that's 90% of it, but there's occasionally they're paying for awards, dinners sometimes are in there. I saw a little bit of that. There was a relatively small amount. There was occasional PD for coaches that was in there, again, a relatively small amount. And rather than try to make this thing bigger than it already is, I said, you know what, I'll put it all under one line and then we can talk about it. I would say that the last 2 years, it's been a relatively constant amount, you know, in the $6,000 to $7,000 range. Again, what we were given for numbers in FY17 was a little bit lower. One of the things that I would also say is that if you look at what was, for example, in 18 is a good example, if you look at what was raised and then you look at what was spent, they don't necessarily match up. Well, one of the things that I don't have and did not get is what incoming fund balances were. So there may be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in some of these accounts that was incoming fund balances, and they're still spending down that fund balance.
So what's the FY16 carryover line that you're carrying?
The FY16 carryover,
Actually, I think there's a typo.
Oh, okay.
16, so it goes the carryover.
From the prior year.
14, it should
Yeah.
be prior year, so it stays at FY16, should go to 17
And then 18.
oh yes, it is a typo.
But
That's
But
carryover
so-
from revolving,
Right.
athletic revolving, correct, Terry?
Yes, it's carryover from revolve.
so other than the revolving, what you're saying is you don't know what, because that's all that's in here is the athletic revolving fund and the operating budget.
And again, what I could glean recently.
Right, from gifts into, but so
Yeah.
what you're saying is, so if I just look at FY18,
Yes.
they're saying that they raised $2,866.
Correct.
You're assuming that they spent it all? Or they told you they spent it all?
Well,
It looks like.
Because really, because what the carryover should be is the carryover should be whatever we have from the prior year.
I think that's our carryover, not the booster organization.
No. Right.
I would
So-
assume if the boosters were giving us money that it was for a specific thing that we spent it, right?
Right.
Or a gift was for a specific
But if
thing.
they said that they raised 15,000, but they only spent 10,
well, yeah, but they didn't
Oh,
necessarily
right.
give it to us.
right, they would have,
They bought jackets.
They would have bought
Right.
it, they would have done it themselves.
right. But then whatever they didn't spend, so they could have said to you, we raised $10,000 last year.
Correct.
They only spent 5.
Right.
They've got 5 sitting
Right.
somewhere else.
Exactly.
The following year could have been inverse. They only
Exactly.
raised 5, but they spent all 10, now they have 0.
Exactly. And that's part of the difficulty of trying to glean information from, it's not just boosters clubs, I mean, same thing, we were trying to glean information from PTOs. You know, it's very, very hard to do that, you know, without obviously the complete cooperation. And again, generally, these groups are cooperative, but, you know, to kind of go back through all of that, you know.
And I don't necessarily know if that's what we were trying to get at with I mean, if
Like,
they raise a ton of money, that's awesome. I think we're just like, what are they giving back to the program and how is that being spent? So like, where's our shortfall that we have to look somewhere else
and
to
that's how the
say,
question was
Right,
posed
like
to
what,
Yeah.
what are they paying for?
Yeah, so
If
if-
they're paying for, you know, they're paying for varsity jackets, they're paying for
Taylor got
TVL
hers
championship
today.
jackets, right, that's great. like, that's a,
But is varsity jackets something that we should be funding? Or
Right,
are they
exactly.
paying for a new set of uniforms because we couldn't afford it?
And that's how
That
the
type of
question was
thing.
posed to them. The
Yeah.
question, the way this was posed to them, and they're actually very excited about this.
Yeah.
By the way, I should tell you that. They were very appreciative of the efforts you're putting forward, is that you folks were trying to get to the total cost of athletics,
Yes.
okay? Because you know that there are groups out there raising money, obviously, for their respective teams, and now there's a group obviously raising money in addition for all teams. So what is it costing for all athletics? And I didn't put it as part of this, but certainly at a later time, if you folks want me to try to pull something, narrative together in a memo or whatever, I did get some examples of some of the types of things, obviously, that they do spend their money on, as I say, and not just for the folks that raise the money, but again, that at least one coach, it might have been two coaches, that said, no, I don't raise any money, and then proceeded to tell me all the stuff that the players bought themselves.
Which are, warm-up jackets and something above and beyond the uniform.
Right.
right.
But it is, again, it's something to know that was purchased as part of your athletic program, and then it becomes, down the road, a decision of the committee to say, all right, well, sort of what do we want to make sure we are having covered in our athletic program, and if we say that warm-up jackets, for example, should be a part of every team, and we haven't been buying them, well, what's it going to cost us?
Because the last thing we want is for some of the kids to have something, and due to affordability,
Correct.
other
Right.
kids can't.
Yes.
Either can't, or it's a hardship on the family if they do, so that's absolutely the goal.
And I,
is to
and I,
have that
and this,
equity.
at least one of the coaches I know reasonably well, and I do want to explore that issue. I'm fairly sure this coach would have made sure that if anybody couldn't have gotten something, that coach would have made sure they got it.
Right.
So I'm not terribly concerned, but I just kind of want to make sure sort of that we have that mechanism. Because if we don't, again, we want to make sure we do have some kind of scholarship program that
Which is what we do for field trips,
yeah.
the outdoor
Yeah.
pursuits,
We have lots of stuff.
trips up to Maine, all of those. We just make sure that nobody goes without.
Right.
Yeah, but it's important.
So then just kind of circling on, again, if I look at profit and loss for the last 3 years, they're all positive. So,
And this includes what we add with end-of-year funding, correct, Terry?
Correct.
Correct, so,
but anything on end of year funding would be on both sides of it. So it's,
Right, it's an expensive one.
right, so it has no impact on the bottom line.
No.
So what we're spending out of the operating budget and what we've collected in athletic fees has covered what we've spent and needed to spend on athletics across the board for at least the last 3 years. So even if we take out, again, the gift revenue, 99% of that's going to have been spent somewhere down below. So if you pull one out, you pull them both out, and the bottom line doesn't change. So we've generated more revenue between what we've funded out of the operating budget and the athletic fees than what we have needed to spend. Not saying that there isn't more that could be spent, but we're not generating
The deficit.
deficits in the athletics, in the broad picture.
Yeah,
well, one of the things Terry and I have talked about is, and the committee has too, that rather than wait till April, May, when we know there's end of year bit of surplus that then we can hurry up and use to, now that he's building the budget and allocating the budget, and it's cleaner to identify those, what we have been spending and build it into the base budget for athletics. For example, we did that this year, we added 16,000
Right.
upfront, knowing that in previous years, we had spent that, it was just at the end of the fiscal year, and, but by doing it when it's allocated, then the athletic director can plan accordingly rather than waiting and crossing his fingers until the spring to see if we have money to spare.
And this is more so for the 3 people who might be watching this, but just also for our own, because people will ask. Right now, we fund 70% of the athletic budget and program is paid for out of the operating budget. The athletic fees that we collect are covering about 25 to 26% of total expenditures. So, over 2/3 of it is funded out of the operating budget that the school is paying for. So, athletic fees are not paying for the entire program. They're not even paying for half of it.
A very small chunk.
Right, right. So,
And in case those 3 people wonder, gate receipts register so small that they
yeah,
register as a percentage.
yeah, yeah. So, all right. Anybody else have any other questions? Great. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Terry.
Thanks,
Terry.
Terry.
Is that it for me?
I think it might be.
I think you're done.
Thank you.
I think enrollment we had next.
Enrollment has changed very little. We lost 1 student at the high school level, but gained 1 at the elementary, so total number of students remained the same at 1,229 in district. 79 of those are choice, and total enrollment, which includes the 21 students who go out of district, is 1,250.
All right. We don't have any strategic planning. We just spend time on the FY20 budget. Don't have any subcommittees. Elementary
You
school.
need to confirm those for me, so
Yep.
I make sure that that's accurate for you guys.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that. Elementary school building committee. We went on the tour last night, which the building looks great.
It looks so great.
Yeah, everybody's done a phenomenal job. Who's been heavily involved in getting this done and gone. So I think for the public, I think what they told us last night in terms of demo of the existing Clyde Brown is they're looking to move next week, move all the stuff from anything that's moving from the old building to the new building will be done next week. Then it will take about a month to abate the existing Clyde Brown, and they were thinking that maybe the last week in July, first week in August is when the actual demolition of the old building will happen. Yeah, but everything seems to be on time and going well.
That's great.
I think Robin volunteered to be in the big truck to
Yeah, to knock
get
it
the,
down.
knock down the building.
Oh, I
Wrecking ball.
didn't.
Yeah.
That was fun. Yeah. No, Mr. Poulos is great. I'm not taking his job.
All right. Do we have any correspondence?
Well, yes, we do. Actually, in your, first of all, the 8th grade art show was last week and was wonderful. It was at the Roach Brothers Community Room, and that was part of the community art show that is supported by the Cultural Council. There are a couple of wonderful articles in the Millis Medway News, the June issue. Madison Schofield is highlighted in an article for achieving her Girl Scout Gold Award, and spent more than 80 hours of community service to create a sustainable solution for, her project was a buddy mentoring program for the elementary school students. We also had a nice article on Yvonne Fitzgerald as coach for the Millis girls track team that had a wonderful season and really did some personal bests and some Division III, I think it was Division III wins at the track meets, and did very well at the state level overall as well. And then the chemistry club, the high school chemistry club, it's a wonderful partnership between the elementary students who come over and the high school year 2, it's chemistry 2 students generally design labs for the kids to illustrate different concepts in chemistry and to get them first of all comfortable and excited about chemistry and thinking of it as potential careers. So that is with the grade 3 students, and there's a nice article on that. And then finally, we have next Monday night at the Millis Public Library also an education roundtable that's being hosted by Senator Becca Rausch and Senator Jason Lewis, who is co-chair of the Education Committee that is looking at the foundation formula and some of the proposals around equity and funding in the public school system. They've invited, about 8 different districts. Mr. Wigan and I have been working on a handout, or I have to determine, I'm not sure what the format of this public forum is yet, but we will have information about the impact. For example, currently the conference committee is debating the level of funding for circuit breaker, and that definitely will impact our budget. So the House has a version, the Senate, and then they go into conference committee to work out a compromise, or which funding level they will choose. Another area that would definitely benefit our budget is reimbursement for special education costs, transporting students to out-of-district schools that they attend. So those are 2 areas we're working on. And that is next Monday night, June 17th, from 6:30 to 8:30 in the Roach Brothers room at the public library.
Nancy, can I add to that briefly?
Yes, absolutely.
It just so happened that last night's elementary school building committee, Jim Caffrey is their new representative, and he expressed that the Board of Selectmen very much want to support anything that this committee does regarding this meeting and regarding school funding, but they can't be there. So I've communicated that with Nancy, and I've said that we will share with them what we're going to present in whatever format it is, and they will definitely be on board with supporting whatever we're going forward with.
Yeah, and I was going to ask anyway, but as you guys are drafting this, if you could share it so we can finalize it before the end of this week, before Friday. But I definitely, and I'm happy to reach out to them as well, if we can understand how they're planning to format this, because in the emails that I had seen, I hadn't realized that this is a broad public invitation, not just local. No, I knew there were multiple towns, but this says, I thought it was a town official, school official kind of roundtable for, and not a roundtable for everybody and anybody, and that just somewhat changes the dynamic, and so I'm just interested in how they plan on managing this event, because if they're going to open it up for 2 hours for everybody to ask questions about everything, I'd be concerned that will get monopolized by not local officials who may have more data and facts and understanding than some people who come and just ask general questions. So,
I will certainly share, I'm hoping tomorrow afternoon to reach out, so I will then share with the committee what the format is. I'm sure they will explain and walk through what has happened so far at the legislative level. That will be I would imagine, the starting information that they give everybody, but beyond that, I'm not sure, so I'll share that as soon as I can.
It's too bad the art show is not going to be up for everyone.
huh?
It says that they're taking the 8th grade art down on June 8th. It would have been good if it was
Oh.
up during the
yeah?
round table.
Oh, they took it down already.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's replaced by a different show yet. I'm sure a quick phone call or an email.
Well, on the invitation here, it says that it's
Yeah,
on to
through
be the
the 8th.
30th through the 8th. It would have been good to have kids art.
I guess, Mr. Chair, the only other thing I would like to speak to is that the Educational Leadership is one of my favorite magazines, and this particular issue happens to be so chock full of really relevant articles regarding social emotional learning, and also many of the things that we're working on in the Millis Public Schools around personalizing learning for students. It's called What Teens Need from Schools. And so we purchased a copy for each school committee member, because as I was going through it, I was finding that I wanted to make copies of every single article practically, and I thought this is just good summer beach reading.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right. We don't have any old or new business. Any school committee announcements?
Nope.
All right, and I will take a motion. We are going to executive session. So I'll take a motion to go to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective
Mr.
bargaining.
Chair,
Ms. Briggs.
I move that we adjourn to executive session to discuss strategies with respect to collective bargaining with union and non-union personnel, not to return to open session.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. It's a roll call vote. Carrie?
Yes.
Robin?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.